Welcome to How I Raised It, the podcast that goes behind the scenes with entrepreneurs who've raised capital. We uncover the tips, tricks, and techniques they use to get investors to write a check. Strap in and turn it up.
Hi, welcome to another episode of How I Raised It, produced by foundersuite.com. Today I have Giraud of Damon Motorcycles coming to us from Vancouver. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Good. Is it, I guess it's middle of summer in Vancouver. How's the weather up there?
Like San Diego. It's always kind of mild and sunny, and it's pretty darn nice.
I was up there last month in June with my brother and cousin, another buddy, and we did a 1,000-mile motorcycle trip around the island. Went over to
Awesome.
western side, and oh man, it was about half the time on dirt roads or trails, couple little trails, and just had the best time ever. So
I actually have not ridden that area at all.
It's cool. I was struck by the beauty. I mean, I grew up in Colorado, which is beautiful. I live in California, which is beautiful, but like Vancouver Island, it's awesome. So you got to get out there.
Yeah, it's the ocean line of the open Pacific. But yeah, I've been on the east side of Vancouver Island a little bit, the inlet, on a motorbike, but mostly around the interior of BC, which is also pretty awesome.
Yeah, I think we're going to try and make this an annual trip because it's just too much fun. So
yeah, good stuff up here.
Cool. Well, very good. Do you get out riding much, given what you do?
Every couple of weeks, I get a short ride in, and a few times a year, I get a long multi-day ride, maybe once or twice a year.
All Canada? And, do you go off and?
Yeah, I've been in California a lot, actually. Sonoma County and around Palo Alto and along the Pacific Coast Highway, Encinitas, San Diego area. Last 12 months or so, been some really, really, really good rides. Those roads are much better, to be honest. Better than here.
Huh, interesting. Grass is always greener.
Yeah.
We've just had so many cars. I agree with you, although those are all beautiful places. We just have so many people in California, so many cars. But anyway. All right, well, let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. Why don't we start off with, what is Damon? What do you guys do?
Yeah, so we've developed a very revolutionary motorcycle. Our focus is on reinventing two-wheel mobility to make motorcycling safer and smarter, and make it a primary form of commuting for, half the miles ridden or driven in the United States, people are commuting less than 10 miles per trip with one occupant. And that isn't the optimized vehicle for that is not a car. But it's not a motorcycle if motorcycling is unsafe and difficult to learn. So we really focused on reinventing the motorcycle experience to one that is much safer, obviously electric, and far less intimidating for the millennial who is really making up a quarter of the world's vehicle sales next year.
Okay, so safer motorcycling experience. What does that mean in terms of product and form factor and everything else?
Yeah, well, that's where things get a little bit unusual. So, first of all, the bike's electric, which isn't that revolutionary anymore. But making a motorcycle have the charge rate and the range necessary for it to be convenient and for people to go from A to B to C in a single trip is another level of performance that you need out of the powertrain. So that's one thing. But the real thing is that the bike has a 360-degree collision warning system on it that allows you to be far more aware, eliminates blind spots, and warn you of potential threats around you. The majority of motorcycle accidents are caused by drivers. And the majority of motorcycle accidents occur in intersections with people who have 3 years experience or less. So at most of the time, the rider is not at fault, but they also don't have the experience to put themselves in the best possible situation to avoid an accident. And so long as motorcycling is dangerous and difficult to learn, it's not going to be a part of the transportation mix. But if you look at the spectrum of commuting from e-scooters and e-bikes all the way to cars and trains, there's this big gap in the middle where a car really isn't optimal for the majority of low commuting trips. So the other thing that the bike does is it also transforms its body position to make riding easier to ride in city conditions, but also more comfortable in highway conditions. And that's where things are really different about a Damon, is that it actually transforms electronically while you ride from a commute bike to a touring bike to a sport bike.
Converting, meaning the wheel length is expanding, meaning the seat height. What's converting? That's interesting.
Yeah, it's the windscreen changes angle. The handlebars telescope up and down. The foot pegs and the seat all change height electronically, and they do it all together. So it moves from an upright commuter bike to a tipped over sport bike, and changes the size and position of the wind bubble, so that on a commuter bike, normally on a commuter bike, you'd be pounded by the wind on a highway, and a sport bike is very difficult to steer in a city, right? So a sport bike is great for the highway, and a commuter bike is great for the city. But if you are riding a motorcycle from A to B, you are definitely going to encounter both. And half the time your bike is not ideal. It's far from ideal for half your commute. And this makes bikes difficult to learn, intimidating, tiring, increasing fatigue, hard to get your feet down on the ground if you're less than 5'8". And today's motorcycle, I would argue, has just really lost product market fit altogether with the millennial buyer. And that's quite acutely evidenced if you look at new motorcycle sales, which have fallen in half in the last 10 years. But used motorcycle registrations have tripled in the same time period. So people are buying low price, easy to ride, unintimidating used motorbikes. They don't necessarily meet all their needs for commuting, but that's what they're buying. They're not buying new bikes that are big, heavy, powerful, and scary.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah. I think of I guess there's definitely a market opportunity there. You think of Harley's coming out with their e-bike that's kind of targeted or tailored for millennials and the younger generation. We'll see how well that does. But yeah, it's pretty interesting. And tell me more about the collision warning. Is this is integrated in the bike or the helmet or some combination or what?
Well, it's rightly integrated into the bike. The helmet is a dream. A Ironman style helmet is a dream. Maybe in 10 years, the technology has to get quite a bit smaller, quite a bit less intrusive, quite a bit lighter. Battery life would need to triple. It wasn't very long ago at all that we had a whole bunch of Samsung phones blowing up on airplanes. I don't want a Samsung phone strapped to my head, or a battery of any kind strapped to my head. I don't need a radar, which radars are much smaller than they were 5 years ago, and they're still far too big for a helmet. And cameras being very small, but the camera's going to move around as my helmet moves. With a collision warning system, the way Damon has developed it, you can keep your eyes forward and ahead with your hands on the handlebars, and using haptic vibration, you can feel the direction and severity of a threat, no matter where your head is. And that radically changes the sense of intuitive awareness that you have while you ride, which brings anxiety down, increases peace of mind, and it makes riding way more fun.
Interesting. And so it's signaling. It's a collision warning that's signaling, not necessarily correcting or braking for the rider. Is that correct? Or
yeah. So there's 3 stages to our development. The first is to alert the rider in real time, a lot like what you have in a car today, which is fairly prolific nowadays. The second stage is prediction, which means to alert the rider before the rider could humanly perceive it, and provide additional warning time that way. It's a detect and alert mechanism. It's just predicting. The third stage is some form of critical automation, where in the event of a collision where the rider is not taking corrective action, the system can intervene by preloading the brakes, a bit the way traction control and predictive ABS do today. So it's not taking over your steering. It's not going to throw you off the bike all of a sudden. But that's where we want to get to within a few years, 3 to 5 years, is critical automation in the event of very severe, momentary situation. With critical automation, you have a situation with riding today. In nearly half of all accidents, riders are not taking any evasive action before the impact occurs. So as awesome as predictive ABS and traction control might be, if you don't see the accident coming and you don't pull the brakes, your ABS is pretty useless. So that's why what's really missing is additional reaction time. And that's where a collision warning system like Damon's comes into play.
That's interesting. Yeah. I feel like I've been riding bikes for 30 plus years. I think I got my first little YZ80 when I was about 12 or something like that. And then for some reason, my parents let me get a Ninja when I turned 16. That was my first street bike, and somehow I survived. I don't know. But I feel like I've been developing 35 years of developing like peripheral vision, right? And kind of rear view vision too.
Yeah.
Any cars going too fast. I mean, whatever, right? So you're kind of putting that into software. Like,
yeah, so much. You're exactly right. So much of our, the algorithm-based intelligence that we've written and tested in our system is based on the way we ride. So, I have 24 years riding experience, my co-founder the same. And we simply reverse engineered what we do as humans when we approach an intersection. What are we looking at? Why are we looking at it? Why is it necessary? And can we train a set of cameras and radars to do the same? So, I'm looking at the painted lines on the ground. I'm looking at the number of lanes. I'm looking at the cross traffic. I'm looking at the tilt angle of the wheel of a car waiting to make a left turn. I'm judging how much it's accelerating, or is it slowing down. I'm looking at through the windshield, and I'm looking at the driver. I'm looking at the condition of the light, the condition of the hand signal. I'm taking all that data in, and I'm assessing what to do next. In our system, we're training it to do exactly all those things, and then assess how to alert the rider and whether to alert the rider, and then eventually whether to intervene and to what extent. And obviously on a vehicle with 2 wheels, that's a lot harder to do than with 4. But really those years of experience that we just talked about, the way in which we interpret the things around us as we approach an intersection, I couldn't do that as a new rider. And the vast majority of motorcycle accidents happen to people with 3 years experience or less who haven't developed that ability. So can we train that ability into the motorbike? And I think we can. So we have.
wow, interesting. So, all right, 1 or 2 more questions about the product. When will it be released, and price point yet? This sounds expensive.
Yeah, we haven't released all those things. It's not. There's electric motorbikes for 60 to 120K, and I think that's absolutely absurd. If a bike is somewhere near the 60K figure, it better be incredibly unique. And so, for our first handful of bikes, we've already have quite a few pre-orders. We plan to make a very limited set available to riders that each one will be entirely unique. And they will be collector's editions that we'll make available for pre-order now, but for shipping late next year, Q4 next year. And then we plan to scale from there. So the first bike is our Halo motorcycle. It really is the flagship bike intended to really create a new conversation around what motorcycling can be like. And I got to tell you, it's entirely different. When you're accelerating up an on-ramp onto a highway going from 20 to 60 miles an hour, so you're moving up to the speed of the traffic on the highway. And as you transform the bike with a button, it draws your upper body weight down into the motorcycle while lifting your butt up and your feet up a little bit with the rising sport position pegs. It feels like the bike is merging you with its central of mass, and it's just a ridiculously exciting feeling. It's very different than holding the handlebars and dropping your elbows down and sort of false tucking. You're being brought down to the bike in a much more ideal, more comfortable position that puts you under that wind bubble, and you're not being fatigued by the wind. And when you drop down out of a highway into the city traffic again, and you need to easily steer and maneuver the bike at low speed so you don't fall over, combined with the incredible precision of electric throttle with no feathering of a clutch and worrying about stalling the engine, your precision and your confidence is like none other. It's a totally different experience. So we're delivering that with the peace of mind of the collision warning system and the silence of an electric motor, and plus a rear view mirror. By the way, our motorbikes have a digital rear view mirror. So now you can see everything behind you. It's a 7-inch LCD screen just below your field of view. So you can glance down and see your speed and your battery level, but you can also see behind you. And it just changes everything.
And do you have a price point yet, or not?
Not yet.
No. Okay.
No, less than 60K, let's say that.
Right.
And then substantially less for the volume production bikes. And we are working on a commuter design as well, a different, smaller motorbike. You could say between a Honda Grom and a CBR 250.
Oh yeah, interesting.
In terms of its physical size.
I look forward to trying it out. I've yet to ride an e-bike at all. Still haven't got a chance. Just hasn't happened yet. So I'm
you'll like it. As long as it's powerful enough. You're probably used to bigger bikes, so you're comfortable with the torque of a 1,000cc type engine.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, let's talk about raising money. So how much have you guys raised, and how many rounds?
We've done 2 rounds. We did a pre-seed and a seed. We announced the last round, which was 2.5 million, in April, May of this year. We're in the midst of it's sort of an interim round right now. We just have a lot of people that have come from some recent announcements and things we've done at TechCrunch that have driven a lot of attention our way. So we're welcoming in a handful of other investors at the close of the last round. So all in all, about 3.5 million, maybe 4 with grants.
And you mentioned you're taking pre-orders. I guess, did you crowdfund or do a crowdfunding campaign, or would you?
No, I don't know if we will, but we haven't really announced pre-orders because we haven't even announced specs or pricing or timing yet. We haven't even mentioned that the motor is electric. People have just assumed that and started writing that the bike is electric. It's really the least part of our focus. A bike that transforms in a bike with a collision warning system is novel enough, if you will. Electric is sort of the obvious bit, I think, but that doesn't mean it's easy. Especially if you want it to be a recreational motorcycle and a commuter bike, then the bar is even higher. But we do have people that are coming in that are very, very eager to get one. So we're welcoming in pre-orders with those people.
Cool. Talk about raising the rounds. I guess, did I see you went through Techstars, or you were involved in Techstars?
Yeah, we did Techstars 2017 in Detroit.
Okay. That's their mobility program, right?
Right. Yeah.
Cool. And did you bootstrap it up to that point, or what was how'd you get this thing off the ground? I mean, building any.
Well,
yeah.
I've built 2 automotive technology companies before Damon. I was asked if I wanted to be a mentor to Techstars. The managing director asked me also, what am I doing right now? I said, well, I've just founded a startup like a day ago. We hadn't even written a single slide, let alone anything else. And a month later, we were doing Techstars. So Damon, during the Techstars mobility program, was like 0 days old. And we very quickly went through a number of potential business models for what Damon could be in terms of how do you make motorcycling safer, and what's the fastest, most scalable way to do it. Making motorcycles sounds like the slowest and least scalable way to do it. So why are we doing that? Well, you can't really graft on a collision warning system onto thousands of different makes and models of motorcycles laying around over the last 25 years of bikes. Many bikes don't have fuel injection. Many don't even have a CAN network, going back not very long ago. Only 8% of motorbikes today even have ABS. So, and a collision warning system that can interact with ABS is a pretty powerful one. So the aftermarket we had to rule out. We focused on fleets. The fleet seems like a great opportunity to scale because the bikes are homogeneous, and there's an immediate pain and need for motorcycle police fleets, for example, to be safer on the road in the line of duty, so to speak. So that's an interim stepping stone. OEMs take years. So we have been interacting with many OEMs, and we've got some great opportunities that we're working on with motorcycle OEMs. And one of the biggest challenges to doing any startup when you are in the supply chain, as opposed to being a consumer brand, is where your technology roadmap for what's possible is severely restricted by the product roadmap of your customer. So if you're a B2B, let's say you're selling to an OEM like Mobileye has, right? Mobileye has collision warning systems for vehicles. When your roadmap is their roadmap, your timelines are on their timelines, and your potential for revenue, your potential for disruption of how you generate revenue and whether you can create recurring revenue is really severely hampered by what they're willing to do. So if you want to collect data, you're not going to get it from your customers' cars. You're not going to get it from your customers' cars. If you're selling to Ford, they're not going to share that data with you in any way that allows you to develop an exponential technology. So those challenges really make working with OEMs traditionally very, very difficult. And there's a lot of discomfort that OEMs have with doing things novel or new. And so, they're sort of saying, hey, what about just blind spots? Can we just have a blind spot and put it on our motorbikes? Maybe in 2023 or 2024. We have a 360-degree collision warning system that uses artificial intelligence and a 4G connection, and is constantly self-learning and expanding its ability to detect more and more cars, meaning the more miles you ride, the more safer your friends get on a Damon motorcycle. but that is a whole lot for an OEM to chew on. So they want to reduce that to something much safer and much easier to adopt. But that doesn't result in a company like Damon delivering an exponential improvement to the world, which really leaves us with having to make our own motorbike.
Interesting. Yeah. Over a decade ago, I was working with a company called AutoNet that was doing one of the first to put Wi-Fi into cars. And I remember those meetings with automotive OEMs and everything you just said. Your timeline is their timeline, and it was painful. Yeah.
Have you heard of Mogio?
I don't think so.
Mogio was one of your competitors. So I founded Mogio in 2012. Mogio is now the fastest growing connected car platform in the world. And it's a cellular OBD device that provides hotspot in the car and is distributed by all the wireless carriers, not by the automakers. Yes, we spent tons of time with the automakers, much like you did with AutoNet. But the automakers just couldn't digest it. They couldn't get their head around it. And they were worried about so many things, technical and privacy and legal. And meanwhile, the wireless carriers are scaling it in 9 countries now, with millions of connected car subscribers, because it's a device and a recurring subscription that gets added to your cell phone plan. And so Mogio is enjoying the beauty of several years lifetime value of wireless subscription service distributed by the wireless carriers, where the OEMs couldn't get any success with recurring revenue subscriptions from their connected car service that they bake in at the factory. So it's a perfect example of, if you depend on an OEM to deliver your product roadmap and any kind of disruptive new revenue model, you're probably not going to be successful.
Interesting. Okay, let's get back to fundraising a little bit. So you have this idea, you get into Techstars, and Techstars is a couple months program. I'm assuming you're kind of pitching just a vision when you start talking to investors, right? Or what? Talk about raising money for something, potentially huge, but it sounds like it was still pretty idea stage, right?
It's the hardest thing to explain. I mean, like, it's a bit different for me because I've done 3 startups. I've done 7 of the 3 tech startups. And so I can raise money on the back of an idea. But there was certainly a time a few startups ago where I had no history, and you still have to raise money on the back of an idea, not much more than a slide deck and a pitch and a plan with a ton of assumptions and little to no validation. In the case of Damon, I mean, we built 2 prototypes very rapidly. We developed the idea with Yamaha Motor Ventures in Silicon Valley, which gave us a degree of credibility towards this idea that we had vetted the idea and the need, at least, with a major OEM. And then we took that idea, we took some motorbikes that Yamaha gave to us, they donated to us, and we very quickly built 2 360-degree collision warning systems on these 2 motorbikes. One was all cameras and one was all LiDAR. And we rode them, and we vetted and validated that a haptic delivered communication with a collision warning system on the bike was actually saving our bacon really quickly. So within 2 months time frame, we could say the idea is sound, OEMs want it and or need it. There's no question that every consumer who rides a motorbike would wish their motorbike was safer. And our very rudimentary prototypes work. So in most cases, yeah, if you can build a prototype on virtually no money and convince people to work for free, then you can validate a concept and raise money on that.
Yeah, interesting. Talk about finding investors who are interested in this space. I know a couple of the e-bike startups have gotten, raised some money, but how do you, if I'm looking at your list, Extreme VP, Round 13, these are names I'm not familiar with. So how did you go about finding investors that would play in this space?
Well, the 4 VCs, or the 3 VCs we have are Canadian, mostly out of Toronto, one in Vancouver. And then we have Techstars, who has Fontanalis and Star Power, who invested in Damon as well, out of Detroit. Google. Just Google and research and go to conferences and talk to people and get on a plane without a meeting and show up at their door and more or less just not taking no for an answer.
Interesting. But what were you Googling? There's not a category called motorcycle startup investors or,
Yeah. Micro VC.
Uh-huh.
I Googled micro VC, Canada, micro VC, California, etc., LA, just various Google searches. A micro VC is typically a pre-seed stage venture capital firm that is willing to take product and market risk, meaning you don't have your market defined yet, you don't have your product defined yet, and really they're betting on management and a plan. And there's three risks that typically every VC or investor takes: technology risk, market risk, and management risk. The fewer of those you can de-risk, the lower your valuation is. And so you don't want to raise 5 million on a valuation of 3, obviously, but if you can raise $500,000 on a valuation of 3, you're doing all right. And your burns to be pretty bloody low at that point, so $500,000 should get you somewhere.
Cool. And were you looking at VCs that were doing hardware or transportation or automotive or something, or what?
Yeah, any of the above. Yeah, and that's a big part of it. Is does the stage of your startup align with the stage comfort level of the VC, and do they have companies in your portfolio that you can point to that have some similarities? So if they've invested in some hardware startup, if you're a consumer and they've invested in consumer, that's a good sign. Or if you're B2B and they've invested in enterprise hardware startups, that's a good sign. In our case, if they've invested in mobility or transportation, that's very, very helpful. Virtually none of them have invested in motorcycle, and if they have, they've probably been burned, which doesn't help. So, and the thing that has been, despite my track record in the automotive tech sector, having built multiple startups, motorcycle makes it very hard because there is generally the strong attitude that motorcycling is dying, which it really is. I'll tell you more about that in a sec. And or that they just don't like motorcycling because it's unsafe. And regardless of whether we can make it safe, it doesn't personally interest them, even if we can paint a picture of a very compelling market opportunity. In the world, 1.5 billion people use a motorcycle every day. I think that's pretty significant. That's greater than all the people in cars. And the world buys twice as many motorcycles as they do cars, making it the number one form of transportation worldwide, and it will be for another 25 to 50 years. But the argument is, yeah, but those are $500 mopeds. Well, they haven't been $500 mopeds for decades, but that's the attitude. I don't care about what India does, or I don't care about what's happening in Southeast Asia. And over here, $30,000 motorbikes are a dying breed. So it's been a very, very difficult climb. And literally our mission is to cause a paradigm shift for safer, smarter motorcycling, because the paradigm today towards motorcycling is not that rosy.
Yeah, interesting. The tech in the bikes, even regular bikes, is pretty amazing. My cousin, who I did this ride on, has the new 2018 BMW GS 1200, and the electronics on that are insane. Like
they're getting really good. Yeah, they're really good. And there's this attitude too that tech doesn't belong in motorbikes. Yet as riders, when we have it, we love it. But let's call it the Gen X or the baby boomer category and older, they have this huge resistance to it, but they buy it anyway, and then they love it. And there's sort of this, I don't want a motorcycle that cheats for me. I want, I'm the purist. I need a motorcycle. I need to feel it. I need to hear it. I don't want it smoothing out my mistakes, but we all love when it does, because it results in keeping the rubber on the road.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay, yeah. Great. Any more, tales from the trenches of raising this round? Did you coincide it with Techstars demo day, or did this happen afterwards, or what?
Yeah, we did Techstars demo day in November of 2017. For whatever reason, absolutely nothing came out of that for us in terms of new investors. Partly, I think, because, or maybe entirely, because that audience was very much four-wheel automotive. It was the Detroit tier 1s, tier 2s, the OEMs, the Detroit venture capital community, very much focused on four-wheel automotive, and Damon being a bit of an outlier in that case. But I don't know. I have some idea of what fundraising is like in Silicon Valley, but in Vancouver and probably the rest of much of North America, fundraising is extraordinarily difficult. And there's just there's just no formula. There's no secret sauce. There's no trick. It's just constantly throwing mud at the wall and seeing what sticks. I would, even though the safe is what's in vogue in Silicon Valley, I'm going to probably never use safes anymore. Safes make for very messy cap tables, whole bunch of different valuation caps and different discounts, and it's very difficult to forecast. I think a lot of startup entrepreneurs spend a lot of time worrying about the current round they're raising without having a very good way of modeling future rounds and future dilution, which needs to be really neatly mapped to milestones, both today's milestones and future milestones to achieve the next round of valuation. And so for me, the safe really messes up the ability to do that, because if you don't know what each round's conversion rates were at, you can't really model the future, and you can't plan your business properly. And I can't think of anything more important than modeling your future financing rounds in terms of how you build your business. So
let's touch on that. I'm assuming a business like yours is going to require a ton of capital. You probably have multiple milestone, tranches mapped out. How are you thinking about, fundraising this thing well into the future? Do you have the next 3 rounds kind of mapped out about what sort of milestones you need to hit, or you tell me? Yeah.
It's, without getting into a ton of detail, you should always be building your IP portfolio. In our case, there's actually a pretty tremendous white space here. So we spend a lot of time and a lot of money building, writing patents. We have a pipeline of over 150 patents. And we have submitted 16 or 17 at this point, mostly global patent applications, because motorcycling is very much a global market. And that's a part of it. Your upcoming hires, the vital importance of certain hires, in our case, AI, data scientists, people with powertrain expertise, that also builds your valuation. And then of course your sales, what are your sales forecasts, and how credible is your plan that you can achieve it? And mapping your financing to the growth of those sales and the ensuing production that has to come out of that. How are you going to produce? How are you going to do it cost effectively? How are you going to create new operating margins and revenue streams that have been untapped before? So we've got a way of building subscription-based revenue in Damon, which is very unusual in automotive, let alone motorbikes. And then mapping that to the proper amounts of funds that you need to achieve those milestones. And if the greater the set of milestones and the more achievable they are, the more money you're going to be able to raise to achieve them. If your set of milestones is pragmatic or realistic, that's not very exciting, and you're going to raise less money and have a lower valuation as a result of that. On the other hand, if your milestones are really ambitious, but you don't have a super solid, credible plan for achieving them, well, then you just seem like you don't know what you're doing, and you're not going to raise any money. So you really have to find the fine line between those two spectrums, ends of the spectrum.
That's a hard thing to do, right? Because it's so easy as an entrepreneur to put forth a milestone, a roadmap, but it's hard to hit that. And then if you don't hit it, how do you go back to your investors and, ask for more money? So I guess there's always the argument you softball your plan or your milestones so that you always beat it. I don't know.
Well, and VCs are smart, right? Maybe most people wouldn't say that, but they're smart cookies. They love to receive a slide deck and then track you for 6 to 12 months. And then look and then dig into your slide decks from the past and see how much things have changed and whether you've hit your stated target 6 months ago, and connect the dots.
Yeah. Very interesting. Okay, great. Kind of a tangent here, but what's your will you sell through motorcycle dealers, or are you going to do like a Tesla model where you're sort of having your own dealership, so to speak, or what? What are you thinking?
We believe entirely in selling and shipping direct. There may probably be a hybrid model between what conjures up in your mind when I say selling direct and the dealerships. I think there's a tremendous footprint of dealerships in North America and Europe that can facilitate the logistics and the after sales service and things like that. But the traditional franchise dealer model is actually the Achilles heel of the entire auto industry. And it's the reason why this, coming out of the words of the CEO of Yamaha, why there's really not much left for them to do anything radically innovative. And dealerships are not remotely interested in selling the future. They want to sell the present right now. They want to sell what they can sell you now. So guess what? That's another V8 SUV. It's not a Rivian electric pickup truck, because they don't know how to sell that, and that's not going to make them money this month. And so that really stifles innovation. The combination of the low operating and profit margins and what makes a dealership successful has nothing to do with innovation. So if you decouple your go-to-market strategy from your from the business model, you can do really new things. And Tesla's a perfect example of that. They haven't had to stuff revenue dollars into making a margin on an electric car. Every one of them makes profit.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, do you have any, if you could go back, I always ask this question, if you could go back and give your younger self one piece of advice about fundraising, or just some general, good pieces of advice you've been given about raising money, what would it be?
That is really hard because I've made a ton of mistakes raising money. Oh no, there's definitely one piece of advice. You need to have really sound advisors and board members around you, but you also need to have the confidence, and frankly, this only comes from experience, to know when to ignore it.
Mm-hmm.
You can very easily end up trying to appease the well-wishing of good advisors and board members who just don't have your unique point of view on your company, because they don't live and breathe it every hour of every day.
Sure.
And you can't possibly convey all the nuances of your business to your advisors and board members in order to get great advice all the time. There's great advice sometimes, and there's stuff that sounds like great advice but doesn't necessarily work. And you have to know the difference between the two. And most of the time, I think that means sticking to what you believe and following your gut. And sometimes that's hard to do when everyone around you has 20 years experience over you.
Yeah, that's good advice. I like it. Okay, if people want to learn more, it's damonxlabs.com, correct?
Yeah, or damonmotorcycles.com/test ride. You want to find out what it's like and see when we're coming in for a demo tour in your area, then go to damonmotorcycles.com/test ride.
damonmotorcycles.com/test ride. And can people sign up for test rides? Can they pre-order it? What happens on this site?
Yeah, they can sign up to test ride and be notified when we're coming through their area, and that'll keep them on the updated informationals that go out with all the news about our next demo tours. We did a demo tour 2 weeks ago from Vancouver to LA and back, and hit a whole bunch of cities and set up test rides with certain groups. So we'll be doing that again in the near future in similar or other regions.
That sounds fun. Where did you do the test rides here in San Francisco Bay Area?
We were in San Mateo, neatly between San Jose and San Francisco.
Cool. All right. I'll have to catch the next one. It sounds fun.
Definitely.
All right, Jay. Thanks so much. This has been fun, and good luck. I can't wait to get on one of these bikes at some point in the future.
It's been incredible. I think you'll be really pleased.
Cool. Yeah, I have a little bit of a passion for the oil and grease and smell of traditional motorcycles, but I know this is all the future, so I'll have to be converted.
Well, you can have both.
That's true. Good point. All right, sir. Thank you very much. Have a good rest.
Thank you so much, Nathan. Talk to you later.